Welcome to Vital MX's 2023 450 Shootout. I'm your host, Michael Lindsay, and as you can see behind me, we have a field of premier Class 450 machinery here to put to the test. We have 6 bikes this year. We do not have 7, as Suzuki denied the ability to bring a provided bike to the shootout, and they have finished last over the last 5 years, so we really didn't feel the need to go out and get one to apply to this test. We weren't going to learn anything new. So we put the rest of the equipment here head to head to try to figure out what is the winner. Per usual, we have 2 different ways that you can digest this test. You can either jump on our website at vitalmx.com. There's a full written article with all of our test riders' individual thoughts, dyno charts, all that good stuff for you to really dive into it. Or you can keep watching this video where I'm going to break down why each bike finished where they did in about 2 minutes each and give you those test rider scores. Yes, at the end of this, we will crown a winner, but as we say every year, the winner of this test is based on subjective opinions of a few test riders that we trust. At the end of the day, we do think that is the best rounded machine, but if you're truly interested in going and spending your hard-earned money, we implore you to listen to each rider's opinion and try to find the bike here that is going to best suit you. So without further ado, let's jump right into the results. Coming in 6th place is the Husqvarna FC450, which sadly finished near the bottom of the rankings with pretty much all of our test riders. And there's one major reason: the 10 millimeters lowered suspension that comes standard on this bike in comparison to the other Austrian manufacturers, along with the fact that it is also a little bit softer setting. Couple this all together, we found the bike just riding low in the stroke, especially on more aggressive motocross tracks, anything that has big braking zones, really abrupt jump faces. We just found the bike feeling low in the stroke most of the time, finding harshness from that, a lack of comfort. Couple that with the fact that the newest generation Austrian chassis that have come out in the last year or so, they're a little bit stiffer than they used to be. We just couldn't find a lot of comfort in the bike, especially across the range of tracks that we rode. However, where the bike does shine, again, that lowered suspension does have a positive on turning character mid-corner feel on certain tracks and with certain riding styles. And then the power itself is very linear and torquey. As with most of the Austrian bikes, it is a little bit more subdued, still having a little bit more closed off airbox, but it does make the bike very easy to ride. And on top of that, it does come with some high-end features such as the Brembo brakes and hydraulic clutch, along with the fact that you have your mapping options, your launch control, your quick shift. This bike definitely seems to lean towards a more vet-oriented or beginner-level rider that will maybe find the appreciation of that softer suspension setting, it being a little bit lower and cornering better, and that mellower power. But for any of our riders that were mid-skill level and above, we really heard a lot of negative feedback when it came to those features. Our 5th, 4th, and 3rd positions in this shootout are really interesting because this shows how subjective these 450 shootouts, or pretty much any motocross shootout, can be when it comes to the test riders, because these bikes all finished within 1 point of each other when we added up our rankings. And for 5th place, we do have the Gas MC450F. Of course, compared to its Austrian brethren, this is technically on the older generation platform. This chassis is a little bit more supple. It doesn't have some of the engine updates in it that the newer bikes have, doesn't have some of the electronics. And to keep the gas a little bit cheaper, it does come standard on Maxxis tires. However, for everything in the test, we did swap over to Dunlop MX33 fronts and rears to just kind of even things out and also be able to make sure we had fresh tires for all the testing. It does have cast clamps and a couple more cheaper parts on to keep the cost down, but those also add up to more comfort in the bike, and that's what some test riders appreciate about it, but some felt like it was a little too wallowy or mellow in places because of that. It again has a very broad power band like we see from the Austrian bikes, but this one doesn't have some of the updates again for the engine, the exhaust system, things like that. And some riders felt like the power was a little too subdued. It really depended what tracks we were riding. When things were slicker, traction was a little bit lacking, the bike really stood out. But when you got in anything deep, loamy, it definitely felt like it was near the back of the pack when it came to output for a 450. And that's really what led to a split decision. We had a few riders that really appreciated the extra comfort that came in this bike. They really felt like they could get a lot out of it and have a lot of fun factor with that. But then some riders just felt like overall it was too mellow, too soft, and just maybe a little bit too basic in their setup when conditions were, again, really deep, really rough, things of that nature. All in all, the Gas MC450 definitely brought a smile onto a lot of our test riders' faces, but it did finish in 5th this year. Coming in fourth is the Honda CRF 450R. Now again, this is a bike that has a little bit of a split opinion on it, but what I think everybody can agree on is the power plant is very strong on the Honda 450. It's been near the top of the field for horsepower for quite a few years now, and it has a very aggressive power character. Couple this with a fairly stiff chassis, it can feel very playful between the power and the ability to throw around the bike. It has a lot of fun factor. It feels like it can be tossed around. So when conditions really suit the setup, this bike is a blast to ride. However, again, that power is pretty aggressive as it comes from the low to the mid-range. Pretty much all of our test riders were on more mellow mapping. They even had versions of their traction control engaged to try to mellow out that power, make it a little bit more usable. And I think everybody could agree we still needed to be more usable in certain situations. And again, the chassis is very playful. The bike is very front end loaded. It turns in really well. It's a very front steer character bike. However, as we've been saying for years with the Honda, balance is key. This seems to be the most sensitive bike in the field when it comes to fork height, your sag position, all those things. You can find the perfect balance at one track, but then it feels like when you go to a range of tracks, you're always kind of chasing things a little bit, making it kind of a tough motorcycle to set up in certain situations. And once you get out of that window, there's definitely some harshness. The bike feels very unsettled, and match that again with the stiffness and the power character, it can get away from you pretty quickly. So again, this is a bike that a lot of guys really enjoyed when the track was smooth, when there was big hills early in the morning. But it seemed as the day would go on each track, we'd hear a few more complaints or just question marks if the Honda 450 was the bike for them. Coming in third is the KTM 450 SXF. Of course, this is the highest finisher of the three Austrian bikes. The KTM is race ready, or ready to race, as they say with their slogan, and that matches up with most of our riders' comments. It isn't as comfortable as the Gas. It doesn't turn in maybe as easy as the Husqvarna with the lowered suspension, but of the three, it is the best balance package. It has the most power output feel to it, having more open air box than the Husky, but also having more engine updates than the Gas. The engine maps seem to make a pretty good difference between the two modes. A lot of riders found the power very favorable in this bike. Again, it's not as exciting maybe as say the Yamaha or the Honda. It is a little bit more drawn out, but at the same time, there's a lot of torque there. This bike can get up and move really easy, and you can ride it pretty much anywhere in the RPM range and get good power and get something exciting and usable out of it. The chassis is a little bit on the stiff side, and same with the suspension settings. We were all kind of able to eventually find something that worked for us. Again, it was a bike that felt like it was really time to go racing on. It wasn't as comfortable when playing around a little bit more, when you were just kind of mellow with your riding style. The more aggressive you treated this bike, the better it would act in return to you. Again, the KTM just kind of keeps falling into the same character. It's not, again, the most exciting at times. It's not the most playful at times, but it knows how to turn lap times. It is a race-ready machine, and again, it has a lot of really great features. One thing that is interesting on the newest generation chassis and bodywork, it is around from foot peg to seat height about 5 millimeters taller than the Husky in the actual seating position and the outgoing generation chassis that the Gas is on. So the bike did feel a little bit tall. We found most of our test riders tend to chopper the KTM out to try to get the best balance out of it. And then the last thing I will say is the air fork that they run on their bike. There are some riders that still don't like it. However, they have really come a long ways with this. Everybody was pretty much able to find a setting that suited them. It wasn't maybe as comfortable as the suspension on the Yamaha, but nobody really had a major standout complaint when it came to the front forks. Now we get into a bike that could be considered long in the tooth, but it did not finish off the podium for any of our test riders. That is the Kawasaki KX450. Since this generation of the KX450 was introduced in 2019, it has received very little updates. It only had one model year in between where it actually did receive any updates, and that is partially because the bike has been on a really good platform now for quite a few years and it has a lot of positives, but is also probably the main reason why it finishes second, because there are one or two standout things about this bike that have needed to be changed since 2019, and Kawasaki has never really done that. So what are we talking about? Well, the positives, the chassis. It is such a comfortable bike in terms of absorption, chassis feel. It's a little bit soft there, but it doesn't wallow around. It's just a lot of built-in comfort into the bike. It's not a bike that you feel a lot of harsh feedback off of. It's a decent balance on turning character. It rear steers pretty well. It front steers a lot better than past Kawi's. It's very stable, but it's still pretty playful. And some of that playfulness comes from the engine character. It is a very well mapped bike stock. The KX450 doesn't have a lot of total output, especially from mid to top. And that is one gripe that some of our test riders had when it was soft and you had big hills. But the initial throttle response is so connective and sharp feeling that it's very easy to blip the bike in and out of corners, make the bike kind of hop over bumps in and out, make it very playful. Again, it puts a smile on your face and brings a lot of fun factor to this motorcycle. Now, the two main negatives that really have cost this thing, in our opinion, shootout wins, at least for our group, has been the front forks. They're still soft. They've been soft for years now. Yes, you can go stiffer with the clickers. You're already all the way out on the fork height, and if you go much stiffer, 3, 4, 5 clicks stiffer on the compression, the forks just start to get harsh. They have really good initial character, but they just do not have enough bottoming resistance. So it's really hard to push this bike through jump faces, deep into big braking bumps. It costs you there, and there's only so much that comfortable chassis can make up for before you feel the harshness from the front end. And then lastly, the power. Again, it's super fun, but compared to some of its brethren that have been getting updated over the years in the 450 class, it just doesn't have enough pulling power mid to top when things get loamy, when it gets deep, when there's big hills. You're pretty much riding this bike in the throttle stop a lot more than most of the 450s in the class. Again, it's a really solid platform. Kawi's done a great job with this bike, but that is the main reasons why it has finished second again. And lastly, taking the top spot, the number one spot with mind-blowing for us, all 5 of our test riders, is the Yamaha FZ450F, the most changed bike in the class. Now, the Yamaha 450 has won the vast majority of our shootouts for years now. While it's not always the favorite of every test rider, it always does really well averagely. This is actually the first year that it's gone 1-1-1-1 basically across the board with each rider, which is very surprising considering how different this generation bike is from the outgoing one. Yes, it is a little bit less stable than the outgoing YZ450. It doesn't have quite as much chassis comfort. However, the KYB suspension on this bike is still top-notch, best out of the box, the most tunable in the class. And when it comes down to is the things that we have still said are good about the prior YZ450s. Every test rider in our group, no matter what track we're at, they're able to find a setup on this bike that works. They're able to find suspension settings very easily, a chassis balance very easily, and with the power tuner and the vast amount of power this YZ450F puts out, they're able to find an engine mode or power character that they really like. It's really easy to get this bike to bark and rev a lot quicker when you're in soft, sandy conditions, but as soon as you hit hard pack, it's really easy to take away a lot of that snap and just draw out the power with their power tuner app and even some of the built-in maps. And on top of that, the engine this year just feels so much longer in power than the prior year. They've raised the rev limit by over 500 RPM, which sounds weird to run a 450 that high, but it makes the power so usable. You would swear that the internal transmission ratio changed a lot this year. Yamaha claims that is not the case, but again, the power is just so broad and usable. The cockpit is a lot better on the bike. We have a much more neutral rider triangle than we've had in past years. Again, add this all up together and we have a package that everybody was just super satisfied with out of the box, and if they did have any complaints, it did not take them very long to satisfy those. And that's why this bike has gone first across the board again this year. However, as we mentioned at the top of this, or at least midway through, we had some that were very subjective, and overall, yes, motocross shootouts are very subjective. It is a group of riders' opinions. It isn't the most scientific testing in the world, and at the end of the day, while we do state that the Yamaha YZ450F is our winner this year, that's because we think it is the bike that will suit the most widest range amount of riders. However, you may have heard things about other bikes in this test that you really like, and again, all these bikes have a different character, and there might be a different one out there that suits you. So we implore you to always take our word, listen to all of our feedback on our shootout, listen to everybody else's. And if you want to hear all of our riders' individual thoughts, make sure you hit the link down below in the description or in the first comment. That'll take you to our website where we have everybody's full opinions written out, and you can figure out why guys placed those bikes where they did. Because again, you may find somebody in our test that you identify with, and that might help you make your next buying decision, because brand new 450s are expensive, and we'd like to make sure that you are spending your money as wisely as possible. So again, if you like this feature, please give us a thumbs up, like, and subscribe, and check us out for more shootouts. And if you have any questions, throw them down in the comments section below. Again, we really value being able to help you guys find the bike that you want to ride next. Throw any questions at us that you might have.